You're already a successful farmer, but what if you could dig a little deeper? To take in a wealth of knowledge on topics like farm profitability, grain marketing, leadership skills, and more. Build your knowledge, strengthen your foundation, and move from experienced to expert. Welcome to GrowU.
Farming is a way of life for many of us, but it is also a business. This is why it's crucial to communicate effectively, long-range plan, and make decisions for your farm operation with a business mindset. My name is Melanie Strait-Bok, and I'm a Regional Vice President of Ag Lending at Farm Credit Mid-America. I'm also part owner in a grain operation in Northwest Ohio. I'm going to walk through ideas to help you communicate properly, set goals that drive your operation's success, and more. So let's get started. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is communication. Just because you're talking doesn't mean that you're actually communicating. Make sure the time is appropriate and that everyone is able to pay attention. And you have to listen as well as talk. Be upfront and honest. Not all conversations are easy, and while it may feel nice to leave something difficult unsaid, that doesn't mean that you're being kind. So be kind and respectfully say what needs to be said to help everyone see different perspectives. Also, waiting for the perfect time to communicate will only make the communication harder. Communication, unfortunately, is not fine wine. It does not get better or easier with age. The next is that it takes vulnerability to share goals and where you want to go personally and as a business. Each generation could have a different perspective, and unless all those perspectives are shared, you may miss the mark with your long-term planning. You may also miss the opportunity to blend the perspectives together into an idea that may help the operation be even more successful than it ever could have been. It'll also keep everyone moving in the same direction. As you go through the business planning, set clear expectations on what needs to be discussed. Don't leave anything to assumption. This will allow each person to know when they can make a decision or a purchase on their own, and when they need to bring everyone together. Also, don't assume someone heard you or understood what you meant as you're running from one piece of equipment to the next. Clarify and make sure everyone is on the same page. Part of communicating effectively is also having formal discussions about your business. While it's easy to have informal conversations while standing around a piece of equipment, not all topics are appropriate for such settings. Formal discussions with set times and agendas are needed to make sure that you have everyone's full attention. Sit down and have the formal conversation about your business plan, your financials, and any of the challenges that you're facing. You need to hold yourself accountable to having these meetings too. It's really, really easy to say, we got to get this done in the shop first before we have that meeting, and you cannot let yourself get out of these meetings. They're incredibly important for the success of your operation. Also, these can be done once a year. They can also be done once a month. You guys have to decide what is right for your operation and what fits best. The next part about communicating effectively is being respectful of how each person processes information. If you're going to ask me to come to a meeting, don't tell me about it beforehand, because I will check out and I will stop paying attention. But if you ask my husband to show up, you better give him the full agenda and exactly what you're going to talk about so that he can come prepared. So know how each person wants to go into those meetings and be respectful of that and provide that for them. Communication isn't easy, and goals can be very personal things to share. Check your ego and your judgment at the door and allow grace and time for everyone to share what their vision and goals are. Sounds simple, but that's one of the hardest things that you can do going into these conversations. If people don't feel safe, it's going to be really hard for them to share their true personal goals and their perspective on the operation. Let's move on to the business perspective. Like many of you, farming is a way of life for me. I have a vision of how I want to raise my family and the values that my husband and I want to instill in them. And our farming operation directly impacts that. But the farm is also a business. Decisions need to be made that allow the business to be successful into the future. Here are some metrics that you can use to make business-focused decisions. If you need help understanding these financial metrics, I encourage you to watch Diane Shoemaker's class from last year. Financial ratios that you need to review start with solvency. This is your assets versus liabilities. You want to know this number because it helps you understand how much capacity you have available if you need to finance an expansion or a transition. The next one is working capital. The tighter your working capital, the less flexibility you have to move quickly with decisions and purchases. This is also your staying power. It's how you weather through those ups and downs of the farming seasons. Next is cash flow. In your packet, you're going to find your cash flow worksheet. And this is where you break down your income and expenses as they are today for all the enterprises that make up your operation. And this is the one that most people complain about the most. Don't let it overwhelm you. Just sit down and start breaking down those expenses and income and get the worksheet completed. After you have it completed for how your operation is today, start to make changes that will reflect your cash flow needs and how they're impacted by the decision or purchase that you're getting ready to make. And so you're going to want to look for key areas. And let's just use real estate purchase as an example. Look to see if you're going to run short on cash during the middle of an operating cycle. Are there any expenses that look high with that purchase? Will you need to take out a loan to make it happen? And what is that payment? Also, do not forget to include your family living. One of the questions you may have to ask yourself is, are there sacrifices you're willing to make to family living in order to make that purchase happen? The next ratio or financial metric to look at is your variable costs as well as your fixed costs. Your variable costs, those are your fertilizer, your seed, your chemicals, and your fixed costs, those are your land rent payments, your equipment payments, and your mortgage payments. And you were going to look at those as compared to your total gross farm income to understand how much of what you're making on an annual basis has to go to those expenses. So it's really important when you look at those financial metrics to know where you are today and how your goals are going to be impacted by any changes to those metrics. Everyone's at a different place, and every operation has different strengths and weaknesses. And then also keep in mind that those metrics are going to dramatically change as you make decisions. If you're a multi-generation farm and you're getting ready to do a transition, those metrics may decline, but that's not good or bad. It just means you need to understand where they're going and the level of management that's needed for each one of those. And after you've done a lot of the work to look at your financial metrics, you can use the cash flow or a what-if analysis to gauge an impact of a decision to your operation. Running these numbers can also be as simple as calling your lender and having them help you. Don't go at it alone. If you feel overwhelmed, reach out to your financial officer and ask. The next thing to look at when you're thinking about a business perspective of your operation is to look at the business structures that you have in place. You're going to want a business structure that allows you to manage your financials, run your operation efficiently, and meet other goals such as mitigate taxes or mitigate liability. I won't go into too much detail here as you'll learn from Ryan Patton about business structures in his class. Know that it will take time to decide the right structure, and you may not get it right the very first time. Get help from the experts and make sure that all business partners are involved in the discussion, and don't forget those communication skills we talked about earlier. The next thing to look at on your operation is diversification. This won't look the same for every operation. What makes sense for your neighbor may not work for you. I encourage you to ask yourself, at a minimum, these 3 questions. Is it needed, or should you just focus on being more efficient and effective at what you're doing today? Does it fit well with what you're already doing? If it's going to be a labor pool in September and October and you're a grain farmer, it's probably not the best option for diversification. Do you have the management and labor capacities to add the additional enterprise? There are only so many hours in a day, and do not commit yourself to more than what you actually have. Let's talk next about risk management. I'm not talking about crop insurance and forward contracting your grain, although those are very important guardrails to make sure you have in place. Look at risk management from a much higher level as well. What risks are you okay with on your operation? Are all of your business partners or family members okay with those same risks? Are you willing to take the risk if it delays a long-term goal? And how much stress is each business partner willing to carry to help the operation hit goals? Let's move on to talk about setting goals. It's best to start early, create a shared vision, and make a plan. You're planning something, whether you put the time into a formal plan or not. To say that another way, are you successful on purpose, or are you successful by accident? While we need to approach our farming operation as a business, now is the time to make sure that your personal vision and goals fit within the business vision and goals, especially if you're a sole proprietor or working through transitions to another generation. If your personal vision is to have more time in the evenings and weekends to pursue a woodworking hobby, can you also grow your farming operation double its current size in the next 15 years? Maybe, maybe not. Ask yourself those questions to make sure everything is aligned. Your workbook contains a really good list of starter questions. It isn't all-inclusive. Some operations may need more questions or different questions, but use them as a baseline and add additional questions to make sure you cover all the important areas for your operation and your family. And then look at your strengths and weaknesses, as well as your opportunities and threats. In a quick Google search, you can find just about any tool or resource you want to do a SWOT analysis, those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's a widely used long-range planning tool to help you be strategic with your decisions. If you're a multi-generation farm, there are some additional questions you can ask. And also, do not forget those communication skills we talked about. These aren't easy conversations. They sound simple, but they're awfully hard. So the first question you can ask yourself is, when does the tenured generation hand over decision-making power? Is it all at once, or is it a little bit at a time over multiple years? The next one is, when does the tenured generation retire, and how do they retire? Do they want to stay in a different capacity, or do they want to step away completely from the farm? How do you plan ahead to treat farming kids and non-farming kids fairly? That is a really, really big question. Fair does not mean equal, and you have to decide what fits both your personal goals and your business goals. So while you're working on your goals, keep in mind that most people often don't think big enough, and they tend to think about things as they currently are versus what they could be. So when you're long-range planning, don't think of changes as you know them today. Look at them in a different way. So is there a way to increase efficiency? Is there a crazy idea that you have to diversify the operation? Don't just look at traditional growth, such as in acres being purchased. So if you find yourself saying, we have to do things this way because it works, and this is how we've always done it, I really encourage you to challenge yourself to make sure that that's truly the best decision for your operation. While you're doing your long-range planning, we typically look at your averages. Those averages take out the highs and lows of your operating cycles, but you also need to look at the extremes. Do you have a plan for the best year ever? Do you have a plan for the worst year ever? Extremes rarely happen, but when they do, ask yourselves questions about what you will do. We all remember 2019 pretty well about the prevent plant number of acres. Those extremes do happen. Also, it is okay to get help when you need to. I've mentioned this a few times, these conversations are hard. And there are times when the goals of each business partner or each generation are gonna be too far apart. Find a third party that you can trust that'll help you navigate those discussions. So, you've got all your goals written down, you've had all the tough conversations. Now is the time to make sure that you can explain the goal and vision of your operation. If you can't verbalize the goals and the vision, you don't really understand it. And that means your spouse, your business partner, your employees probably don't understand the goals of the operation either. Within reason, share what you can so that your employees, your business partners, and your spouses can feel like they're a part of the operation's success by contributing to those goals. You can also use your long-range goals as a reference point to make sure that any decision you, your employees, or any family members are making are gonna lead to the farm's success. And then last but not least, once you have your long-range planning done, don't stop there, please. Do not leave your long-range plan sitting up on a shelf collecting dust. You should at least visit it once a year. So the last piece that I want to talk about is an advisory board. When you think about differentiating your operation and being successful going forward, an advisory group can be that one person or group of individuals who are willing to take a neutral approach to your operation and provide feedback to challenge your perspective. I heard once that the person selling a product shouldn't be the same person that owns the product. Because when we get too close to something, it's really hard to stay objective. So find some partners to invite to the table that can bring insightful and meaningful disruption to your operation. Don't invite the people who are going to tell you how great you are or how great your business is. Here's a list of individuals to invite to your advisory board. You can invite your lender to help you understand the financials that you have, your accountant, because they help you with tax management and record keeping. You can invite a commodity marketing advisor, and ideally someone who has a wide view of the markets, globally and domestically. You can also invite a local business owner, someone that owns and operates a business outside of the agricultural industry that could bring insight into what other industries are doing to remain competitive. You can do a fellow farmer as well. So if you don't want your neighbor to see your financials, you can look for someone outside of your footprint that understands the same challenges that you're facing. One of the things you want to do when you show up for your advisory board meetings is to come with an open mind and a specific agenda. And then also check your ego at the door. So be ready to take in the questions and the feedback, stay open-minded, and then revisit that feedback and those questions after the meeting to make sure that you give time to the perspective that your board was sharing. If you can't stay open-minded in your advisory board, they won't help you grow. So we've went through a lot of things today about long-range planning, and there isn't one cookie-cutter approach to what you need to do on your operation to find out what your goals are and how you're going to reach them. Each generation or partner needs to be open to feedback and different perspectives, and they also need to be willing to work together to come up with a plan that everyone can get behind and believe in. This is farming. You can't take out all of the risks, you can't predict the weather, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen in the markets. The last couple of years have proven that for us. But what you can do is give your operation a reference point that makes sure you continue to move in the right direction. And I want to thank you for joining me today and watching this video about long-range planning. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help, or at least connect you with someone in your area who might be able to. Thank you again.